My name is Pat Jones, and I'm on Twitter way too much. And one of my favorite hashtags is, say it with me now, plant pathologists are weird. Because what we consider to be problematic issues, walking on a golf course and seeing a gigantic patch of dollar spot or an enormous fairy ring, you think, that's the worst thing that's ever happened. And they see it and they're like, oh, yeah, that's awesome. And that's why we say plant pathologists are weird. But plant pathologists are also the most important people in our business in a lot of ways because they help us solve unsolvable problems. And we're very, very fortunate to have four people here who are experts in this field and legends and budding legend, but maybe a future legend at some point in the future. So I know you know who these people are, but I'm going to reintroduce them quickly and just say welcome to Dr. Bruce Clark. Martin. Why did I do that?
It's because we look alike.
It was bound to happen.
Off to a bad start.
Well, you're retired now, or semi-retired.
So what?
Yeah, well, okay.
My name didn't change.
Whatever this guy's name is, he's a legend, okay? Dr. Bruce Martin, I'm so
Who
sorry.
Is he? Oh.
And for Purdue University, Dr. Rick Latin, who's going to join us today. And then my friend Dr. Jim Kerns, who's, again, a budding legend. And then Kathie Kalmowitz, who does this every day, wearing the hat for BASF and stewarding products through the marketplace. So fundamentally, we're here to talk about a new category of chemistry, a new product line that BASF has introduced. And they just sort of asked me to ask questions here of Dr. Clark and everybody else to tell you a little more about Revysol. I will just tell you that we're doing a series of articles about this in Golf Course Industry Magazine. The first one was in the January issue, so take a look at that because it'll talk about there how this product came to be and how it was developed initially and the fact that it takes 10 years. It's been 10 years in the making and $250 million to develop the Revysol product that you'll now see in this market as Maxtima. Okay, so but each of these people played a role in bringing that product to market, and I want you to think about, okay, what questions would I ask Dr. Clark and the other legends here if I had a chance to ask about how this product's going to impact the marketplace. So I guess fundamentally, when were you, Dr. Clark? Apparently not yesterday. When did you get involved in this process, and at what stage did you start looking at the opportunity that Revysol presented?
Early on, as we got involved, I think Renee said they started with it in 2013. It probably was 2014
that
we started doing our initial trials, and usually it's going to be on diseases like dollar spot, brown patch, and anthracnose.
Right.
And we all were in different regions more or less, so they divide up the diseases in a way to be more efficient.
Right.
Some of my first trials were on dollar spot on bent grass, even though we don't grow a lot of bent in South Carolina anymore, but when we do,
thankfully,
it gets hammered.
Yeah.
With diseases. So,
and again, you get that big plant pathology grin on your face.
Yeah.
Yay!
The most susceptible dollar spot cultivar, just give it hell.
So when you were making those observations about the new class of chemistry, what were you seeing, and what made you think maybe this has got some upside?
Well, we didn't know what the class of chemistry was because
I
they hold that information close to their chest.
Kathy keeping her secrets, right?
Yeah, and Renee, and apparently we can't pry it out of them ever until late in the game. So we're, in some ways that's good because we're not biased, by what we're going to expect. So we have this compound, and we're going to look at different rates, and we're going to in some cases inoculate. We always like high disease pressure so we can separate the sheep from the goats. And early on we saw fantastic dollar spot control with it. And in my case, I'm doing dollar spot in the late spring into the summer, and I usually just kind of keep the plots going because brown patch will come in naturally, and then we'll get a little data on brown patch down the line. And we get so hot. I'm in Florence, South Carolina, so it's tough, and about 60 miles from Myrtle Beach. We would normally see growth regulation out of something like propiconazole banner or tebuconazole, some of the other triazoles. Now that we know what the chemistry is,
Right.
we can kind of go back and say, well, this one didn't do that.
Do you characterize it as a triazole or an azole? How do you?
Well, I'm still learning. They think it's a new subclass, but it's close to the triazole chemistry apparently. There are some unique things they tell us about it.
And as you learn from those plots and as you see what's going on, how do you feed that information back to the folks at BASF, and how are you answering questions from superintendents in the area who are curious about what you're doing? Because word always gets out, you know?
No, we don't show them those plots.
Oh, I see. I see.
Well, sometimes you have a field day and you have these plots that are unnumbered,
Experimental.
and they're clean.
Yeah.
And you just kind of keep walking at a quick pace.
So Rick, you really are in the disease capital of the universe, right there in the heartland of America. When this product was brought to you, what were your thoughts about it, and what are you looking for? Because there's so much problem with resistance management now. So what's foremost in your mind as you start to look at a new product, whether or not you know it's a new class of chemistry or not? How do you go about that process? And you've done this for a few years now. How do you go about that process, and then what are you hoping to learn from the process?
Well, we're testing against dollar spot, which is a threat season long for us, even in the heat of the summer. So some of the things that we're looking for, not only dollar spot control, but how many other bases can it cover, and whether or not we can apply this to, let's say, in our greens in the heat of the summer, and not see the same effects that Bruce Martin here observed in South Carolina. So yeah, and I would just say that we also started looking at it in 2014,
Right.
and numbered compounds. We see everything that comes through as a numbered compound, and we talked amongst ourselves about what is this new chemistry, because it was looking so good. All right, what is this? And we, it had excellent dollar spot control. It wasn't causing the problems that we saw on bent grass greens with other DMIs. So we're very interested in that. That's what got us excited first. Okay, and some of the work that we've done at Purdue, and we'd like to follow up on this, though I am retired right now.
Isn't everybody?
Yeah.
You and Dr.
So-
Clark here.
Yeah. So we would like to follow up on that, is we found that in cases where we were working with a strain that was trending towards insensitivity or resistance to the dollar spot pathogen, we were seeing extended periods of control, okay, where it's keeping the pathogen down and keeping the turf symptom free for a longer period than any of the other DMIs out there.
Right. Resistance management is obviously the number one issue that we're going to face as people develop their programs in the future. What struck you again about this? Because DMIs have been used for quite a long time. What struck you as different about this, even not knowing about the classification of chemistry, that you thought this is going to be a good tool?
So it's all part of our first experience with the 750. And
What's the 750?
that's the methane trifluconazole, which is Revysol, okay? Specifically, working on an area with a population that is trending towards insensitivity, we were able to apply the fungicide to the plots that already had the disease in it, okay? So we had symptoms already being expressed. And in those plots where other DMIs would fail to stop infection and promote turf recovery, this particular fungicide, this Maxtima fungicide, was able to stop infection, promote turf recovery, even though we had a resistant type.
Perfect.
That's the short end of it, right?
Okay. So, Jim, where did you come into the process, and describe a little bit about your part of the world? It's a little different from Florence, South Carolina, and then your process for looking at these, because you work with BASF, you work with other companies, and you sort of have a process for doing this. Describe that for everybody and kind of what you found in those initial results.
So it's probably the same time, 2013, 2014, we got it. Same thing like Bruce. So in North Carolina, we're a little bit farther north, so we still have probably half our courses are bent grass, but half are Bermuda grass. So we're a little bit unique in that we still get a lot of cool season protocols and started getting more warm season protocols. So same trend. Initially, we work with it with dollar spot. I think almost every company starts with that disease, because you're going to be successful selling it after. And same thing as we were seriously emailing back and forth of what it is, because the green where I tested it first, same thing, that level of insensitivity, the DMIs are exceptionally high, and we had remarkable control. So we've also worked with it on other less common diseases like fairy ring.
Right.
And Maxtima was outstanding. I think that trial was 2014, 2015, and much like the dollar spot, we put it out in an area with massive amounts of fairy ring, and it was able to turn that place around. So that's what's been cool, I think, with this active ingredient, because it acts a lot different than other DMIs.
Right. And one of the things that I think people, we'll come back and talk about the PGR effect in a second, because I think that's really important. But one of the things that people need to understand is this resistance management problem is not going to get any better. We're going to have to continue to stay ahead of the curve and constantly. Based on your understanding, how does this product do that? How does it stay ahead of the curve a little bit?
Well, it works.
Okay.
Number one, but
thanks, Doc.
yeah, it's. One of the cool things that they've introduced us to the chemistry on it is how the molecule moves and how it binds is different, and that's where I think you see this control of these resistant populations. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to develop resistance if we don't use it correctly, right? If we don't rotate.
Exactly.
And it's something we can't continually apply, but it's going to be a nice fit, because you think of, where dollar spot's going to be probably the most prone to resistance, and then maybe anthracnose. We have a lot of SDHIs.
Right.
So this is a nice fit to give that rotation and some of the existing contacts and multi-sites that are out there.
So, Kathie, as you and Renee are stewarding this through this process and working with these guys, and you know what's going on, and you know things that they don't know, you're getting this information in from them. What are you thinking as these results are starting to come in, and what did you think this is going to be so important for superintendents? Because
it's because the DMI chemistry, or the triazole chemistry, over the last few years has been considered by superintendents as a group of chemistry that is needed, just as Jim just said, because you need it in order to still integrate your spray program, to be able to have a mixture of chemistries at hand that are going to be able to work on some of these very serious diseases. However, in the past, that plus the turf safety aspect, turf safety for bent grass during the high heat of the summer without any growth regulation, and as we then later saw in the next few years, the ability of this new chemistry to actually work on some other diseases that are extremely important for the ultra-dwarf Bermuda grass area
Exactly.
of the country.
So which diseases are you talking about?
Yeah, this chemistry has now brought in a whole new area of being able to be used, or at least this is what we're proposing as we continue to look at it. So for us in the transition zone and down through the south, including Florida, Texas, and over to California, spring dead spot has been one of the key diseases that we early on hoped to have had safety on, but also high level of efficacy. And then over the last couple years, we've also been able to define the take-all root rot pathogen on warm season turf.
Right, particularly with ultra-dwarf Bermudas and
Yes.
yeah, right.
Yeah, and both of these diseases, spring dead spot, both a fairway and a greens disease, and take-all root rot, normally managed on greens, both of them take out turf. They can actually be extremely destructive. But this class of chemistry predominantly has been one that the superintendents will use because it has shown good efficacy, but they're very worried about the turf safety aspect.
Right.
When we have cold, cool, wet springs and Bermuda is not greening up and it's not growing.
I can't imagine that ever happens. Oh, the last 2 years.
That's exactly right. And they already know that they have the potential to maybe lose turf just because of the weather pattern. We're hoping that this chemistry is now going to bring them relief because we have seen very good turf safety. So again, through tech service, so I'm part of the technical service team, we have worked hand in hand with Renee as she has reviewed, Dr. Keese has reviewed all of her biology trials that these people have initially worked with. They've actually looked at the key diseases, and then they have looked at a number of rates. The tech service group then goes in the closer years close to registration, and we then take what they have already found out and built on how to manage these new products in the existing world of chemistry, the
Right.
existing world of putting together a management program for the superintendents.
That's a perfect way to put it. But in addition to the sort of opportunity to use it during less than desirable weather, the other thing that I heard that came out of this was the lack of a PGR effect, that you weren't seeing that. How would you characterize that, and why is that important to these folks?
Well, the superintendents have kind of, in my opinion, kind of gone a little too far in being afraid of the DMIs to the point where they're not using really valuable chemistry, particularly for the root diseases.
Throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Exactly, and there have been times, I'm sure, in all of our careers where we had to recommend that, and they use them and they get disease under control. And yeah, there's some PGR effects, but it's worth it when you control the disease. Now, if you can eliminate that fear by having a really safe DMI, then you're sweet. And so far, we've seen nothing, and that's even at double the proposed label rates. Right now, I have some trials on Bermuda grass that were timed for spring dead spot or for take-all root rot, but we put the initial applications right out when the superintendents were putting poetriv down. They overseed. So that's the other thing we're seeing, particularly golf courses that have spring tournaments and they want to have perfect greens. They may play on overseeding.
Right.
And it's got to be safe to the overseeded grass. So a young germinating seedling needs to go ahead and establish without any problems. And many of the DMIs will inhibit that.
Right.
And this one doesn't, apparently.
Which is great, again, because that's the race that everybody's in your part of the country, is to get the golf course tournament ready by April 1 or whatever it might be.
Right.
So it gives them a new tool to do that.
And we don't have to alter our timing to go for a root disease like spring dead spot just to avoid an overseeding event.
Right.
And if you're not overseeding, no big deal.
Right.
Put it down.
How about in cool season turf in terms of that growth regulation effect? Did that surprise you to see that? Was that a pleasant surprise, or was it something you expected based on what you knew about the chemistry?
Well, it's not that we expected it. I mean, however, it was a very valuable observation to see that it wasn't having the same effect on turf quality as some of the others.
When you talk about that effect on turf quality, you're talking about phyto, you're talking about what are some of those impacts that you would normally expect?
Well, it's some phytotoxicity that's expressed as a difference in color, and it's also a thinning sort of thing, and maybe the grass gets a little bit long and leggy,
Right.
Laying over.
I think the technical term is crappy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So So that's an issue. That's definitely an issue for us. And for a while, we've been in the heat of the summer when anthracnose is really pressing us, okay, on the Poa annua. We've been avoiding DMIs, and because of that growth regulation effect. And now, it's been 15 years maybe since we've had a DMI introduced, and so here's one that will provide us dollar spot control throughout, anthracnose control, and it doesn't have a stress effect on the grass like maybe the previous DMIs, the previous class of DMIs had associated with it.
So bringing the DMI back and putting the baby back in the bathwater.
It's such a valuable tool.
Right.
It just is, because they cover such a broad waterfront. It covers so many bases.
Right.
And I don't know, we talked about this earlier, but and Kathie got into this maybe, and Jim, the fastest way to a resistant population is the same fungicide over and over and over again. So now we have to be very strategic with this, but at the same time understand on greens, especially in the lower Midwest where I live, where we have anthracnose issues, we can put it back in and use it very judiciously season long, even in the heat of the summer.
You seem excited about this, because I know that every single day you're taking phone calls from superintendents that are struggling with this stuff, and it looks like you've got a new answer for them.
Well, I help superintendents develop their programs, okay? And I want to be able to include as many tools as possible. And I am excited about the fact that we could have a DMI that can not have any of the disadvantages associated with it and all the advantages associated with disease control.
Yeah, perfect. So when you look at it from a sort of transition zone standpoint, because you guys are using everything, now you're going to have zoysia grass greens all over the place. So what was appealing to you about the lack of a PGR effect? Obviously it's that turf quality issue, but there's some fundamental growth issues there with alternative Bermudas and some of these non-traditional turf grasses that you're seeing everybody adapting in your part of the country.
Yeah, so that the exciting thing is you have the flexibility now to go out on multiple grass species with no issues that we've seen with this turf safety. And like Rick said very well, then you get the benefit of a class of chemistry that has, in some cases, been forgotten for ultra-dwarf Bermuda grasses.
Right.
And
how many of you had just given up on DMIs? Okay, Chris is honest. I mean, you're right, and that it has just gotten to be kind of a dirty word.
It has. And so at least the initial research for safety has been flawless. And one of the cool things, I think, to give them props of what BASF is going to do further are all these demos, throughout the country on golf course.
Right.
To see it under your management practices, the mowing heights and growth regulation. So, I think we all feel pretty confident it's going to be fine. Right. Because we've looked at it up to even a 4x rate with no issue.
Right.
So that's an exciting thing, and like you said, when you look at when the label comes out and superintendents get to play with it, look at the list of diseases.
Right.
There's not many other fungicides that have the list that, like they showed us with Navicon. They needed 3 slides to go through the.
Explain what Navicon is.
Navicon is the Maxtima fungicide mixed with pyraclostrobin or Insignia.
Right.
So that's another cool thing, is you have the DMI by itself, which doesn't happen often, and you can get a pre-mixed product that enhances its control spectrum.
Right. I think another thing is kind of off topic that's cool is the fact that, we all see a lot of products that come out of the ag market, and 5 or 6 or 10 years later after they've been in ag, they're coming to turf. This one was developed a parallel program. So our brethren in the ag business, and we're usually kind of the redheaded stepchild, we're getting this product the same time they are, and we're also getting it as a compound, which is really cool.
That's one of the reasons we couldn't figure out what it was, because it
wasn't out there, right?
They launched it with the ag market, and we were trying, when you asked, were we surprised? Well, no, because we didn't know what the hell we were working with.
Right.
And then when they told us, it was like, wow.
But it hasn't behaved.
It hadn't behaved.
But by the way, so you're fine. So these golf course test plots that are happening where people are going to have a chance to see them. Where are some of those, and how is that process going to work? Because that's the proof is in the pudding for Chris and Dick and everybody to be able to go see this in their neighborhood. How's that going to work?
Well, we're working through our traditional researchers. Some of the states have turf consultants that were formerly with the university but have now become consultants in their retirement. So they're
privatized crazy plant pathologists. Yeah.
And a few of our more crazy turf agronomists. And so we are working through our traditional researchers. Many of them had some of the original trials that they did the baseline work for Dr. Keese in the biology program. So they are accustomed to knowing rates that the product was tested on. So what we have done is divided the country up and decided that we need not only those cool season trials on bent grass, which either was in the fall of the year or later this spring. So again, targeting most likely dollar spot or anthracnose as you go towards the summer. But also we involved at least 50% of the courses in our ultra dwarf management zone. And that way we're able to target getting it out in the real world setting on golf courses that are in strategic locations, so that when the product becomes registered, we'll be able to potentially ask those superintendents if we can bring in a group of people.
Right.
Would you be willing to let us show some of these plots?
So at this point, the product is in the final stages. It's sitting at EPA, but we all know what's been going on at EPA here this year. They've, like the rest of the government, have not been doing a lot. So a process that normally takes quite a bit of time is taking a little bit of extra time. But the expectation is this product will still be available in 2019, both the Maxtima and the Navicon formulations.
Right. Yeah, and we were fortunate. We had what is considered under EPA's PREA an expedited review because we were given the reduced risk candidacy. Right. They accepted our package, the dossier that was submitted that involves not only mammalian toxicity and environmental toxicity, but also all of the safety to turf and the diseases.
Right.
That package is what EPA actually said in all of the last couple years of review, showed them that this product really was different than the DMI classic chemistry that they previously saw.
So even they recognize that. That's great.
They recognized it. It is the first time ever that EPA has given a DMI or a triazole a reduced risk candidacy acceptance.
That's remarkable.
It is. It is.
Before we get to final questions, do you guys have questions? What do you want to know about this new product? Because you don't get a new class of chemistry very often, Dick.
How do you get on the list? We love doing crazy experiments.
Right now, we have accepted the number that we can do under the number of researchers that we have to work with. Once the product is registered, we will be able to take on some additional sites. We were under a restriction from EPA and from our regulatory people to be able to monitor the sites that we have because they have to be done by researchers. Once we're registered, we will be able to have additional trials before the product becomes available into the marketplace.
Other questions? So let me. This is where the rubber hits the road. As you look at this product and getting the registration and getting it out into the market here sometime later this year, but probably this summer, maybe, whatever. How are you going to recommend it as part of a program, Bruce? How does it change what you're going to recommend that your people do? And Rick said earlier, a big part of all of your jobs is saying this is the right program for you. How does this change that thought process for you?
Well, in our case, it gives us flexibility. Jim Kerns said that. And it depends, like any program, what the diseases are that the person is impacting them. So not everyone has take-all root rot. Right. So in that case, they have some different options for spring dead spot control. Those that have both spring dead spot and take-all, this is a great product to put in in there, and then they're also going to strengthen overseedings if they overseed. So it's going to fit very well.
That's an under discussed
Right.
important thing.
It
Yeah.
is, and like most things, there's a lot of things that come late in the process, and this is one of them. But and a lot of people have gotten away from overseeding, and it kind of becomes out of sight, out of mind. But now there's some that are bringing it back, and
Yep.
and
It's the
you
fiscal
can't-
it's the fiscal reality of our business.
yeah, and you can't ignore that. If there was an issue there, you certainly want to find it before the product becomes registered.
Yep.
So we're looking at that now, and it looks good.
Cool.
And that's what we thought. And we looked early in the process with Dr. Keese, looking at sensitivity of the product on all the ultra dwarfs that we had available and TIF dwarf, and saw no issues. Compared it with triazole chemistry that did have issues,
Right.
to prove that it would then if we put them down, and they did. So we just feel really confident about using this anywhere we need to for the diseases that we're going after.
Cool. Jeff, did you have a question?
Where is it with Fairy Ring and the other DMIs?
So the question, where is it with Fairy Ring? And the work that we've done on most of our Fairy Ring work is transitioned to ultra dwarfs. It's been flawless. I mean, as good as almost any DMI we've tested, if not better. You know, the one thing that we saw with it is it did take 4 applications at this site is what we programmed in, and I think we started with 20 to 30% disease on average in the plots, and by July it was clean, 100%. Yeah, we put them out. In this case, we
Can you
targeted.
repeat the question?
When did we target the application? We did 55-degree soil temps down in Wilmington, North Carolina was the site. So that ended up being March 1st, I think, or March 15th. And then did 4 monthly apps, and that gave us flawless control. Both the Maxtima and the Navicon. The other key thing they did is they mixed it with a wetting agent, which I think was important, and of course it was watered in.
So Rick, if I'm in your band over through Indiana and Columbus, Ohio, all the way over through Pittsburgh and all that stuff, Dollar Spot's my nemesis. What are your recommendations going to be on how this product could be used as part of a program targeted at Dollar Spot control?
Yeah. Well, there's no one program that fits all. So it all depends on, the superintendent's challenges or threats on there. And it will be different from greens versus fairways, et cetera. And I'll just echo what my colleague said about the broad spectrum nature of this and its safety. I'm seeing that one of the biggest differences now that we can include that in the heat of the summer without fear of the disadvantages of a traditional DMI.
Right. Nope, that's a perfect observation. Final thoughts from you. How is this going to change the way you communicate about programs to your constituents, all of the superintendents and turf professionals that look to you for this kind of guidance? What are you going to do differently than you would have done before Revysol came along?
I think, at least for me, I'll take a little bit different approach. That with this chemistry, what I think is unique is, there are new things that have come out. We've had premixes come out, and you look at somebody's program and you say, well, it's doing okay. This is one, I think, that it's like, yeah, you need to put this in somewhere because of the flexibility, and then they use it and see, did something get better, by putting this into the program. I think it will, based on what we have seen, because every time we work with even a new disease with it, we see good results. So
Nice.
I like it, for that flexibility. We're not going to worry about PGRs. Summer patch has been a big issue for bentgrass
Right.
for us. So now we can go out in July with this product with no issue.
Right.
So it's
Which would have been unthinkable before.
correct.
Right.
And we were using products, I think, that were substandard for summer patch. DMIs are king.
Cool.
And so a lot of flexibility, I think, to work with it.
A year from now, when we come back, and we're talking about a cycle that we've had through this product and using it in the field, what's your hope for what you've learned and where we're at and how the product has been valuable to these folks?
Well, the hope is that the superintendent will have had an experience with the product. And
So you're suggesting they buy this?
I am saying that when the product becomes available, we would like them to consider. And again,
She wants you to buy it. She really does.
and again, I do feel that their words were very appropriate. It's the flexibility. So far, we've been able to show that the product is going to bring value. If, of course, has anthracnose, the timing in the heat of the summer, the product appears to be safe. And at the same time, if it's, a cool spring and they have spring dead spot, or a cool spring and they have to do that spring take-all application, this product so far has shown that it can withstand those climatic conditions and at the same time be extremely effective controlling those diseases. So I think that there's going to be a lot of ability for superintendents, no matter where they are, with whatever the problem is that they are facing where they need a new solution, they'll be able to look at this product and judge for themselves.
Very cool. Any final questions? Dick?
Any idea of cost range per acre?
The product is right now not available for sale, and that therefore there is no discussion on those kind of topics. But we thank you for being very interested.
That's just a fact of life in the pre-registration days. You can't discuss that. Any other questions? I want to thank everybody for coming and listening and learning a little bit today. And I want to thank Dr. Bruce Martin, Dr. Rick Latin, Dr. Jim Kerns, and Dr. Kathie Kalmowitz. And I also want to encourage you to continue to read our series in GCI on how Revysol has come to market, because this just doesn't happen very often. And I can't emphasize enough that we're very fortunate as an industry to have this kind of innovation and this kind of R&D going on, because that doesn't happen every place. And I think we should appreciate and value the contributions that companies like BASF make to our scientific knowledge. And again, thank you for giving some of your time. And we'll be back again at 1 o'clock with a group of superintendents talking about some things that don't have to do with buying the product quite yet, but their experiences with BASF products. So again, thank you very much, and we'll see you again at 1 o'clock. Bye-bye.